Morning, guys. It's your very first class. And let me share an application screen with you and we'll kind of get going on this. I want to kind of walk you through exactly how this might work this week. Okay, so should be able to see my screen now. Let's kind of walk over here. I'm going to assume that this is not your very first Indiana Tech class, since it is interpretation of fiction. However, it might well be that some of you might. So I'm going to take a brief second to kind of look through this in case you have not done something online before. If you're a student that's been on campus, perhaps you haven't done something all online. Look over here on the side. You're going to want to take a look at this. Notice that we are only a 6-week class. We have 6 modules. That means that this class goes really, really quickly. It also means that you should assume, if you have been doing a traditional 16-week class, that you're almost doing 3 weeks of work in every week. So that means this goes really, really fast, and you've got to plan ahead. If you don't plan ahead and make yourself some time, carve out that time within your own schedule on a weekly basis, this is not going to be a class that you probably succeed in very well. The overview, you can see, you'll start every single module, have an overview that'll help you walk through things. That'll give you an assignment order. I'm not going to go through all that, but notice that you have something due or something that you need to do almost every day. You can't afford to wait until the end of the week to do this stuff, or you'll be late. So on the first week, we have something a little bit different, and that's this course preparation quiz. Those are something that happens in every single online class. Do those things first. That is how they tell if you're attending, and that is how they don't kick you out, right? So you want to make sure that that course preparation quiz is one of the top things on your agenda. All right. Then you're going to see that the classes start early in the week, and you're going to need to start to do that reading ASAP, even on Sunday. If you don't do some of that reading right away, even if you are a reader, even if you really love to read, it's a lot to do. So you're going to need to start doing that stuff right away. The first thing that you see that's going to be due is usually on Thursday. So kind of how it works: Sunday you start doing the reading. Monday we have this optional class video. You can attend if you want to. You can watch it recorded if you wish. That's totally up to you. But that's always going to be available to kind of give you a walk through the week and some additional stuff to kind of think through as you're thinking about stuff. Then you've got your first initial post to the discussion boards, usually by Thursday. So now Thursday, Friday, Saturday get really busy, right? So there's always going to be an initial post that you make to the discussion board, and then there's going to be something that's due to reply to your classmates' initial posts. And those are usually not due until Sunday, but please don't wait to do that. If you wait to do your classmate responses until Sunday when everything else is already due, one, it doesn't give them the chance to read your responses and activate or utilize your information. And two, it doesn't give you the chance to see other people's work and then also make some changes to your own stuff based on what you've read. So make your initial post to the discussion boards by Thursday, and then I recommend by Friday or Saturday making your peer responses so that you then have that information in your head to make your revisions, okay? Then you're going to do a little bit more reading, and that's mostly student sample writing that gives you some examples from the text about what you're doing, especially if this is your first literature class or it's been a while since you've done a literature class. It's a little bit different than a traditional writing class, so you want to do a little bit more reading through the student samples to get a better idea for what is expected here. You also have short exercises due. That's a lot of stuff that you're responding to. And then you're going to read more. See, there's a lot of reading, so you have to really plan some reading time almost every day. You're going to be reading about a thesis. Now, you've all done a thesis or a theses in the past for other classes, for other essays, but again, this is a literature class, so it's a little bit different, so you want to make sure that you read that short section on what to do there. You're also going to read then a couple of short things here. I-2, Barbie Doll, The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner, and The Road Not Taken, which you might be already familiar with. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff here to do, guys, right? You cannot afford to wait past the beginning of the week to get going on it. All right, so let's move into the next thing, which will be, let's take a look at our assignments. Or let's look at our learning resources first. When you open up, I'm still in Module 1, okay, so if you open up Module 1, you're going to see a section on learning resources. And we're going to kind of talk through some of this. If you don't watch this right away and you look at the lesson, you're already going to be looking at some of this. Some of this is, there's so much here that hearing it and seeing it and reading it in multiple different ways is going to be a good idea anyway. There's a picture of the textbook that you should have received. And again, the reading assignments here. Also, there's some MLA format stuff. If you have done different kinds of format, then you're going to want to revert back to MLA. MLA is usually the first one that you learned. You may have already learned IEEE or APA or some other kind of format too, so that you may just need this refresher on MLA. MLA is used for literature and humanities, so that's what we're going to be using for this particular class, is all MLA format. So there's a section there on doing that. Don't forget the OWL, OWL, Online Writing Lab of Purdue is usually what we recommend as the most comprehensive way to look up anything MLA or grammatical or any sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is dive into this Module 1 lesson. So let me pull that up to make sure you can see it. All right, so this is something that Indiana Tech puts together. Anybody that takes this class online is going to receive exactly the same course that you guys are, so that it's very consistent. This will kind of walk you through stuff. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but I am going to point out a couple of things in this lesson that will be useful to you. And there's some fun stuff, some fun cartoons like this to kind of keep your attention as well and help you understand what's the difference and why are you taking a humanities or a literature course. How might this be useful? So we're going to quick watch this quick video. What is literature for?
We have a general sense that these sort of places are filled with things that are deeply important. But what exactly is
I'm just going to stop that just for a second.
Spend our time reading novels or poems when
I want to make sure that you guys can hear it. So let's try that again. No, it says we can hear it. So let's hope we can. Okay, here we go.
Out there, big things are going on. Let's have a think about some of the ways that literature benefits us. Of course, it looks like it's wasting time, but literature is ultimately the greatest time saver because it gives us access to a range of emotions and events that it would take you years, decades, millennia to try to experience directly. Literature is the greatest reality simulator, a machine that puts you through infinitely more situations than you could ever directly witness. It lets you safely, that's crucial, see what it's like to get divorced or kill someone, feel remorseful, or chuck in your job and take off to the desert, or make a terrible mistake while leading your country. It lets you speed up time in order to see the arc of a life from childhood to old age. It gives you the keys to the palace and to countless bedrooms, so you can assess your life in relation to that of others. It introduces you to fascinating people, a Roman general, an 11th century French princess, a Russian upper-class mother just embarking on an affair. It takes you across continents and centuries. Literature cures you of provincialism and at almost no cost turns us into citizens of the world. Literature performs the basic magic of showing us what things look like from someone else's point of view. It allows us to consider the consequences of our actions on others in a way we otherwise wouldn't. And it shows us examples of kind, generous, sympathetic people. Literature typically stands opposed to the dominant value system, the one that rewards money and power. Writers are on the other side. They make us sympathetic to ideas and feelings that are of deep importance, but that can't afford airtime in a commercialized, status-conscious and cynical world. We're weirder than we're allowed to admit. We often can't say what's really on our minds, but in books, we find descriptions of who we genuinely are and what events are actually like, described with an honesty quite different from what ordinary conversation allows for. In the best books, it's as if the writer knows us better than we know ourselves. They find the words to describe the fragile, weird, special experiences of our inner lives. The light on a summer morning, the anxiety we felt at gathering, the sensations of a first kiss, the envy when a friend told us of their new business, the longing we experienced in the train, looking at the profile of another passenger we never dared to speak to. Writers open our hearts and minds and give us maps to our own selves so that we can travel in them more reliably and with less of a feeling of paranoia and persecution. As the writer Emerson remarked, in the works of great writers, we find our own neglected thoughts. Literature is a corrective to the superficiality, compromises of friendship. Books are our true friends, always to hand, never too busy, giving us unvarnished accounts of what things are really like. All of our lives, one of our greatest fears is of failing, of messing up, of becoming, as the tabloids put it, a loser. Every day, the media takes us into stories of failure. Interestingly, a lot of literature is also about failure. In one way or another, a great many novels, plays, poems are about people who messed up, people who slept with mum by mistake, or who let down their partner, or who died after running up some debts on shopping sprees. If the media got to them, they'd make mincemeat out of them. But great books don't judge as harshly or as one-dimensionally as the media. They evoke pity for the hero, fear for ourselves, based on a new sense of how near we all are to destroying our own lives. But if literature can really do all these things, we might need to treat it differently to the way we do now. We tend to treat it as a distraction and entertainment, something for the beach, but it's far more than that. It's really therapy, in a broad sense. We should learn to treat it as doctors treat their medicines, something we prescribe in response to a range of ailments and classify according to the problems it might best be suited to addressing. Literature deserves its prestige for one reason above all others, because it's a tool to help us live and die with a little bit more wisdom, goodness, and sanity.
Okay, I really love that video. I wish I had made it myself. So let's go back to what we're talking about here in this particular lesson. So if you want to see that video again, it's this one right here. It's on page 2 of the module 1. And there's another one here called How Literature Can Change Your Life. I'm not going to watch that one for you with you, but feel free to do that. Now, it gives you some things to do. As you're going through this particular assignment, you're going to see that there's ways that are going to help you. And again, remember, I keep saying this is really a literature class. It's a little bit different than probably classes you've taken in the past, where maybe you took, maybe you took a basic composition class where you had to write an essay, maybe even an essay about yourself. Here in this class, you're doing something different. You're not responding to yourself. You're not responding to researched paper. You're responding to literature. And that is a wholly different thing. So make sure that you go through these things to give yourself an idea of what it is that you're doing. There's a map in the textbook on page 8 that kind of helps you to respond to literature, gives you some quick assignments to kind of help you to think that through in a little bit better. We talked about the MLA stuff. There's more MLA stuff in here too. A couple more videos that help you with basic stuff will help you review. There's the OWL link that I talked about. Again, OWL's online writing lab. And there's the thesis statement stuff. And again, remember that thesis statements are very different when it comes to literature than they are for, say, an information paper or an argumentative research paper, or something that you've done in the past. There's also a bunch of sample papers, and I highly recommend them as it's in the reading to go through and see, okay, how does someone write about literature, and how is that slightly different than other types of writing, right? Okay, so let's get rid of that. Again, you're going to want to go through that by finding it in the Module 1. Okay, when you open up Module 1, you're going to see activities and assessments. You're going to want to go through that. Don't forget there's the course preparation quiz. There's the discussion board that we talked about. really detailed information about how to do it. So don't forget to do that. And also information about how to respond by, again, I said it says Sunday. I highly recommend doing it by Friday or Saturday. There's the short answer questions that you're going to be doing after you do some of these readings. We'll talk a little bit about some of those readings here shortly, and the short writing assignment. Okay, so all of those things are here. A reminder to you, if you have not gotten Microsoft Word, the software on your computer is available free for you. I will post the link for that in the announcements shortly after we finish this video. So if you don't have it, that's what you're going to be submitting everything in, is using Microsoft Word software. And that would be the Microsoft Office is the suite, is all of the software that's free to you. You're going to be using Word. That would be Doc and DocX files. It is also possible to save something as a PDF and for me to read it. However, if you're using like a Chromebook or something else and you submit something based on whatever software you have in Chromebook, I'm not going to be able to see it, and you won't get credit for it. So make sure that you are using Microsoft Word or being able to save as a PDF to do any of these sort of assignments where you're turning something in as an attachment. Okay. Rubrics are provided. I highly recommend, the rubrics are really provided for you to be able to take a look at your stuff. So you're going to write your things, you're going to look at that rubric, you're going to write your things. Before you turn it in, you're going to want to go back to that rubric and ask yourself a question: have I done all these things? You know, this gives you the opportunity to kind of grade yourself. Is the thesis debatable? Is it clear? Is it able to be proven within a poem? Supporting point number 1, does it contain a specific detail? Supporting point number 2, does it? So you want to go through this and ask yourself these questions and grade yourselves. This way you might get to supporting point this one and say, oh my goodness, I forgot to put supporting point number 3. Oh no, what do I do? Well, you haven't turned it in yet, right? That's what the rubric's provided for you, so you could go back and go, oh, let me fix this before I turn it in, and then you turn it in, right? So make sure those rubrics, take a look at them ahead of time so that you know what you're doing, and then take a look at them again before you turn it in. Okay. You're also going to do a live tech reflection. If you're here live, welcome, and you'll be reflecting upon what you're learning here from that, or if you're, for the most part, most people watch these recorded, then you'll watch it recorded and do the reflection based on that. Okay, so that's where you're going to get the assessments. I'm going to go back here to Module 1 so you can see, again, we have the overview, we have the learning resources. That's where I took you through first. That's where we found those videos. The activities and assessments, that's where you're going to turn things in. Okay, 2 different places there, both of them important. All right, now, I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about the road most taken. Okay, so there are some things provided for you in the learning. I'm going to provide you with something else. Now, this is a viewpoint from The Atlantic, which is a publication that's been around forever and ever, highly respected. This is a different point of view on this particular poem. You're going to read the poem, you're going to look at the things provided, and then I want you to take a look at this. It'd be actually really good if you pause right now. If you haven't read the poem, go into the text, read the poem first, and then come back and listen to this. This is a wholly different thing. Probably most of you have heard of the poem, The Road Not Taken. And so the Atlantic says, hey, you know what? This one's misused. It's used in advertising. It's used in all kinds of things. We hear about it all the time. And it's what they say is the most widely misread literary sensation. So let's play that so you can hear what that might be.
2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
Now, perhaps you'll see this. Oops, let's not replay that. So perhaps you'll see it differently when you see someone play it with video, of course, right? You probably, when you read it, had different images in your own head. And maybe just seeing those images make you see the poem in a wholly different way, right? So I want to provide a couple of different things for you to think about it and go, okay, what does it mean? What does it mean that somebody's walking in the wood? Is there some deeper meaning to that? Or is he just walking in the wood and deciding whether he's going left or right? And as you know, probably there's more to it than that. You've all made some sort of choice and then looked back and thought, should have I made the other choice? I don't want to make this choice. I don't want to have to choose left or right. I don't know which one is right. And he says that he chose the one that was less trodden as opposed to the one that was more trodden. And that has made all the difference. So you might disagree with his interpretation of that. You might say, hey, you know, maybe the choice you made wasn't such a good one too. So I'm going to not say too much more about that, but I wanted to provide you with a video that might provide you with some other thoughts on what you're seeing. All right. Now, the other thing that you read is a little bit longer, and that is a reading, or that is a shorter story by Raymond Carver. And I'm going to play this. This is read by James Naughton, and it's actually the whole thing read at a location in 2016. I will provide the link for this as well. But this will be how we end our thoughts this morning, is just going through the rest of this. I won't play all of it. We have, what do we have left? We have 25 minutes or so left in this particular thing. So I'll play 25 minutes of this, and then I'll provide you with the link in case you want to watch the rest of it yourself. But this is, some of us like to read, some of us like to do, some of us like to hear, some of us like to seek. We have different ways in which we learn, and this is a way that you might hear it differently. So let's play Raymond Carver's Cathedral, read by James Naughton.
Raymond Carver's Cathedral is read by James Naughton. This blind man, an old friend of my wife's, he was on his way to spend the night. His wife had died, so he was visiting the dead wife's relatives in Connecticut. He called my wife from his in-laws. Arrangements were made. He would come by train, a 5-hour trip, and my wife would meet him at the station. She hadn't seen him since she worked for him one summer in Seattle 10 years ago. But she and the blind man had kept in touch. They made tapes and mailed them back and forth. I wasn't enthusiastic about his visit. He was no one I knew. And this being blind bothered me. My idea of blindness came from the movies. In the movies, the blind moved slowly and never laughed. Sometimes they were led by seeing-eyed dogs. A blind man in my house was not something that I looked forward to. That summer in Seattle, she had needed a job. She didn't have any money. The man she was going to marry at the end of the summer was in officer's training school. He didn't have any money either. But she was in love with the guy, and he was in love with her, etc. She'd seen something in the paper, help wanted, reading to blind man. Had a telephone number. She phoned, went over, was hired on the spot. She'd worked with this blind man all summer. She read stuff to him, case studies, reports, that sort of thing. She helped him organize his little office in the county social service department. They become good friends, my wife and the blind man. How do I know these things? She told me. And she told me something else. On her last day in the office, the blind man asked if he could touch her face. She agreed to this. She told me he touched his fingers to every part of her face, her nose, even her neck. She never forgot it. She even tried to write a poem about it. She was always trying to write a poem. She wrote a poem or two every year, usually after something really important had happened to her. When we first started going out together, she showed me the poem. In the poem, she recalled his fingers and the way they had moved around over her face. In the poem, she talked about what she had felt at the time, about what went through her mind when the blind man touched her nose and lips. I can remember I didn't think much of the poem. Of course, I didn't tell her that. Maybe I just don't understand poetry. I admit it's not the first thing I reach for when I pick up something to read. Anyway, this man who'd first enjoyed her favors, the officer-to-be, he'd been her childhood sweetheart. So, okay, I'm saying that at the end of the summer, she let the blind man run his hands over her face, said goodbye to him, married her childhood, etc. Who was now a commissioned officer, and she moved away from Seattle. But they had kept in touch, she and the blind man. She made the first contact after a year or so. She called him up one night from an Air Force base in Alabama. She wanted to talk. They talked. He asked her to send him a tape and tell him about her life. She did this. She sent the tape. On the tape, she told the blind man about her husband and about her life with him in the military. She told the blind man she loved her husband, but she didn't like it where they lived. She didn't like it that he was a part of the military-industrial thing. She told the blind man she'd written a poem, and he was in it. She told him that she was writing a poem about what it was like to be an Air Force officer's wife. The poem wasn't finished yet. She was still writing it. The blind man made a tape. He sent her the tape. She made a tape. This went on for years. My wife's officer was posted to one base and another. She sent tapes from Moody Air Force Base, McGuire, McConnell, finally Travis near Sacramento, where one night she got to feeling lonely and cut off from people she kept losing in that moving around life. She got the feeling she couldn't go it another step. She went in and she swallowed all the pills and the capsules in the medicine chest and washed them down with a bottle of gin. Then she got into a hot bath and passed out. But instead of dying, she got sick. She threw up. Her officer, well, why should he have a name? He was the childhood sweetheart. What more does he want? He came home from somewhere. He found her, and he called the ambulance. In time, she put all this on a tape, and she sent the tape to the blind man. Over the years, she put all kinds of stuff on tapes and sent the tapes off, lickety-split. Next to writing a poem every year, I think it was her chief means of recreation. On one tape, she told the blind man she decided to live away from her officer for a while. On another tape, she told him about her divorce. She and I began going out, and of course, she told her blind man about that. She told him everything, or so it seemed to me. Once she asked me if I'd like to hear the latest tape from the blind man. This was a year ago. I was on the tape, she said. So I said, okay, I'd listen to it. I got us drinks, and we settled down in the living room. We made ready to listen. First, she inserted the tape into the player and adjusted a couple of dials. Then she pushed a lever. Tape squeaked, and someone began to talk in this loud voice. She lowered the volume. After a few minutes of harmless chit-chat, I heard my own name in the mouth of this stranger. This blind man I didn't even know. And then this. Well, from all you've said about him, I can only conclude. But we were interrupted. A knock at the door, something. And we didn't ever get back to the tape. Maybe it was just as well. I'd heard all I wanted to. Now the same blind man was coming to sleep in my house. Well, maybe I could take him bowling, I said to my wife. She was at the draining board doing scalloped potatoes. She put down the knife she was using and she turned around. If you love me, she said, you can do this for me. If you don't love me, okay. But if you had a friend, any friend, and the friend came to visit, I would make him feel comfortable. She wiped her hands with the dish towel. I don't have any blind friends, I said. You don't have any friends, she said. Period. Besides, she said, God damn, his wife just died. Don't you understand that? The man's just lost his wife. I didn't answer. She told me a little about the blind man's wife. Her name was Beulah. Beulah. That's a name for a colored woman. Was his wife a Negro? I asked. Are you crazy? My wife said. Have you just flipped or something? She picked up a potato. I saw it hit the floor, roll onto the stove. What's wrong with you? She said. Are you drunk? Just asking, he said. Well, right then, my wife filled me in with more detail than I cared to know. I made a drink. I sat down at the kitchen table to listen. Pieces of the story began to fall into place. Beulah had gone to work for the blind man the summer after my wife had stopped working for him. Pretty soon, Beulah and the blind man had themselves a church wedding. It was a little wedding. Like, who'd want to go to such a wedding in the first place? Just the two of them plus the minister and the minister's wife. But it was a church wedding just the same. It was what Beulah had wanted, he'd said. But even then, Beulah must have been carrying the cancer in her glands. After they'd been inseparable for 8 years, my wife's were inseparable, Beulah's health went into a rapid decline. She died in a Seattle hospital room, a blind man sitting beside the bed and holding on. They'd married, lived together, worked together, slept together, had sex, sure. Then the blind man had to bury her. All this without ever having seen what the goddamn woman looked like. It was beyond my understanding. Hearing this, I felt sorry for the blind man. For a little bit. Then I found myself thinking, what a pitiful life this woman must have led. Imagine a woman who could never see herself as she was seen in the eyes of her loved one. A woman who could go on day after day and never receive the smallest compliment from her beloved. A woman whose husband could never read the expression on her face, be it misery or something better. Someone who could wear makeup or not. What difference to him? If she could, if she wanted, she could wear green eyeshadow around one eye, a straight pin in her nostril, yellow slacks, purple shoes, no matter. And then to slip off into death. Blind man's hand on her hand, his blind eyes, streaming tears. I'm imagining now. Her last thought may be this. They never even knew what she looked like. And she on an express to the grave. Robert was left with a small insurance policy and half of a 20 peso Mexican coin. The other half of the coin went into the box with her. Pathetic. So when the time rolled around, my wife went to the depot to pick him up. With nothing to do but wait, sure, I blamed him for that. I was having a drink, watching the TV, when I heard a car pull into the drive. I got up from the sofa with my drink and went to the window to have a look. I saw my wife laughing as she parked the car. I saw her get out of the car and shut the door. She was still wearing a smile. Just amazing. She went around to the other side of the car where the blind man was already starting to get out. This blind man who featured this was wearing a full beard. A beard on a blind man. Too much, I say. The blind man reached into the back seat and dragged out a suitcase. My wife took his arm, shut the car door, talking all the way, moved him down the drive, and then up the steps to the front porch. I turned off the TV. I finished my drink, rinsed the glass, dried my hands. Then I went to the door. My wife said, I want you to meet Robert. Robert, this is my husband. I've told you all about it. She was beaming. She had this blind man by the coat sleeve. The blind man let go of his suitcase. Up came the hand. I took it. He squeezed hard, held my hand, and let it go. I feel like we've already met. He boomed. Likewise, I said. Didn't know what else to say. Then I said, welcome. Heard a lot about you. We began to move then, a little group, from the porch into the living room, my wife guiding him by the arm. The blind man was carrying a suitcase in his other hand. My wife said things like, "To your left there, Robert. That's right. I'll watch it. There's a chair. That's it. Sit right down here. This is the sofa. We just bought this sofa 2 weeks ago." I started to say something about the old sofa. I'd like that old sofa. But I didn't say it. Then I wanted to say something else, small talk about the scenic ride along the Hudson. How going to New York, you should sit on the right side of the train, and coming from New York, the left-hand side. "Did you have a good train ride?" I said. "Which side of the train did you sit on, anyway?" "What a question! Which side?" my wife said. "What's it matter which side?" she said. "Just ask," I said. "Right side," the blind man said. "Hadn't been on a train in nearly 40 years. Not since I was a kid. My folks. Been a long time. I'd nearly forgotten the sensation. I have winter in my beard now," he said. "So I've been told, anyway." "Do I look distinguished, my dear?" the blind man said to my wife. "You look distinguished, Robert," she said. Robert, she said. "It's just so good to see you." My wife finally took her eyes off the blind man and looked at me. I had the feeling she didn't like what she saw. I shrugged. I never met or personally known anyone who was blind. This blind man was late 40s, heavy-set, balding man with stooped shoulders, as if he carried a great weight there. He wore brown slacks, brown shoes, a light brown shirt, tie, a sport coat, spiffy. He also had this full beard. But he didn't use a cane, and he didn't wear dark glasses. I'd always thought dark glasses were a must for the blind. The fact was, I wished he had a pair. At first glance, his eyes looked like anyone else's eyes, but if you looked close, there was something different about them. Too much white in the iris, for one thing. The pupils seemed to move around in the sockets without his knowing it and being able to stop it creeping. As I stared at his face, I saw the left pupil turn in toward his nose, while the other made an effort to keep in one place. But it was only an effort, for that eye was on the roam without his knowing it or wanting it to be. I said, "Let me get you a drink. What's your pleasure? We have a little of everything. It's one of our pastimes." "Well, I'm a Scotch man myself," he said fast enough in his big voice. "Right," I said. "Sure you are. I knew it." He let his fingers touch his suitcase, which was sitting alongside the sofa. He was taking his bearings. I didn't blame him for that. "I'll move that up to your room," my wife said. "No, that's fine," the blind man said loudly. "You can go up when I go up." "A little water with the scotch," I said. "Very little," he said. "I knew it," he said. He said, "Just a tad." The Irish actor, Barry Fitzgerald. I'm like that fellow. When I drink water, Fitzgerald said, I drink water. When I drink whiskey, I drink whiskey. My wife laughed. The blind man brought his hand up under his beard. He lifted his beard slowly and let it drop. I did the drinks. 3 big glasses of scotch with a splash of water in each. Then we made ourselves comfortable. We talked about Robert's travels. First, the long flight from the West Coast to Connecticut. We covered that. Then from Connecticut up here by train. We had another drink concerning that leg of the trip. I remembered having read somewhere that the blind didn't smoke because, as speculation had it, they couldn't see the smoke they exhaled. I thought I knew that much, and that much only about blind people. But this blind man smoked his cigarette right down to the nub. Then he lit another one. This blind man filled his ashtray, and my wife emptied it. When we sat down at the table for dinner, we had another drink. My wife heaped Robert's plate with cube steaks, scalloped potatoes, green beans. I buttered them up to slices of bread. I said, "Here's bread and butter for you." I swallowed some of my drink. "Now let us pray," I said. The blind man lowered his head. My wife looked at me, her mouth agape. Pray the phone won't ring and the food doesn't get cold, I said. We dug in. We ate everything there was to eat on the table. We ate like there was no tomorrow. We didn't talk, we ate. We scarfed, we grazed that table. We were into serious eating. The blind man had right away located his foods. He knew just where everything was on his plate. I watched with admiration as he used his knife and fork on the meat. He'd cut 2 pieces of meat, fork the meat into his mouth, and then go all out for the scalloped potatoes, the beans next, and then he'd tear off a hunk of buttered bread and eat that. He'd follow this up with a big drink of milk. It seemed to bother him to use his fingers once in a while either. We finished everything, including half a strawberry pie. For a few moments we sat as if stunned. Sweat beaded on our faces. Finally, we got up and we left the table. Left the dirty place. We didn't look back. We took ourselves into the living room and sank into our places again. Robert and my wife sat on the sofa. I took the big chair. We had us 2 or 3 more drinks while they talked about the major things that had come to pass for them in the past 10 years. For the most part, I just listened. Now and then I joined in. I didn't want him to think I'd left the room. I didn't want her to think I was feeling left out. They talked of things that had happened to them. These past 10 years. I waited in vain to hear my name on my wife's sweet lips. And then my dear husband came into my life, something like that. But I heard nothing of that sort. More talk of Robert. Robert had done a little of everything, it seemed, a regular blind jack of all trades. But most recently, he and his wife had had an Amway distributorship from which I gathered they'd earned their living, such as it was. The blind man was also a ham radio operator. He talked in this loud voice about conversations he'd had with fellow operators in Guam, Philippines, in Alaska, even Tahiti. He said he'd have a lot of friends if he ever wanted to go to visit those places. From time to time, he'd turn his blind face toward me, put his hand under his beard, ask me something. How long had I been in my present position? 3 years. Did I like my work? I didn't. Was I going to stay with it? What were the options? Finally, when I thought he was beginning to run down, I got up and turned on the TV. My wife looked at me with irritation. She was heading toward a boil. Then she looked at the blind man and said, "Robert, do you have a TV?" The blind man said, "My dear, I have 2 TVs. I have a color set and a black and white thing, an old relic. It's funny, but if I turn the TV on, I'm always turning it on, you know. I turn on the color set. It's funny, don't you think?" I don't know what to say to that. I had absolutely nothing to say to that. No opinion. So I watched the news program. I tried to listen to what the announcer was saying. "This is a color TV," the blind man said. "Don't ask me how, but I can tell." "We traded up a while ago," I said. The blind man had another taste of his drink. He lifted his beard, sniffed it, and let it fall. He leaned forward on the sofa. He positioned his ashtray on the coffee table, then put the lighter to his cigarette. He leaned back on the sofa, crossed his legs at the ankles. My wife covered her mouth, and she yawned. She stretched. She said, "I think I'll go upstairs and put on my robe. I think I'll change to something else. Robert, you make yourself comfortable," she said. "I'm comfortable," the blind man said. "I want you to feel comfortable in this house," she said. "I am comfortable," the blind man said. After she'd left the room, I listened to the weather report and to the sports roundup. By that time, she'd been gone so long, I didn't know if she was ever going to come back. I thought she might have gone to bed. I wished she'd come back downstairs. I didn't want to be left alone with a blind man. I asked him if he wanted another drink. He said, "Sure." Then I asked if he wanted to smoke some dope with me. I said, I just rolled a number. I hadn't, but I plan to do so in about 2 shakes. "Well, I'll try some with you," he said. Damn right, I said. That's the stuff. I got our drinks and sat down on the sofa with him. Then I rolled us 2 fat numbers. I lit one. I passed it. I brought it to his fingers. He took it and inhaled. Hold it as long as you can, I said. You could tell he didn't know the first thing. My wife came back downstairs wearing her pink robe and her pink slippers. What do I smell? She said. We thought we'd have us some cannabis, I said. My wife gave me a savage look. Then she looked at the blind man and she said, Robert, I didn't know you smoked. He said, I do now, my dear. There's a first time for everything, but I don't feel anything yet. Now, this stuff is pretty mellow, I said. This stuff is mild. It's dope you can reason with, I said. It doesn't mess you up. Not much it doesn't, bub, he said and laughed. My wife sat on the sofa between the blind man and me. I passed her the number. She took it, toked, and then passed it back to me. Which way is this going? She said. Then she said, I shouldn't be smoking this. I can hardly keep my eyes open as it is. That dinner did me in. I shouldn't have eaten so much. It was a strawberry pie, the blind man said. That's what did it, he said. And he laughed his big laugh. And then he shook his head. There's more strawberry pie, I said. Do you want some more, Robert? My wife said. Maybe in a little while, he said. We gave our attention to the TV. My wife yawned again. She said, your bed is made up when you feel like going to bed, Robert. I know you must have had a long day. When you're ready to go to bed, you just say so. She pulled his arm. Robert? Came to, he said. I had a real nice time. This beats tapes, doesn't it? He said, coming at you. I put the number between his fingers. He inhaled, held the smoke, and then let it go. Like he'd been doing this since he was 9 years old. Thanks, Bub, he said, but I think this is all for me. I think I'm beginning to feel it. He said. He held the burning roach out for my wife. Same here, she said. Ditto, me too. She took the roach, she passed it to me. I may just sit here for a while between you two guys with my eyes closed, but don't let me bother you, okay? Either one of you. If it bothers you, just say so. Otherwise, I just may sit here with my eyes closed until you're ready to go to bed. Your bed's made up, Robert, when you're ready. It's right next to our room, at the top of the stairs. We'll show you up when you're ready. Wake me up now, you guys, if I fall asleep. She said that and she closed her eyes and went to sleep. The news program ended. I got up and changed the channel, sat back down on the sofa. I wished my wife hadn't moved out. Her head lay back across the back of the sofa, her mouth open. She turned so that her robe had slipped away from her legs, exposing a juicy thigh. I reached to draw the robe back over her, and it was then that I glanced at the blind man. What the hell? I flipped the robe open. You say when you want some strawberry pie, I said. I will, he said. I said, are you tired? Want me to take you up to your bed? Ready to hit the hay? Not yet, he said. No, I'll stay up with you, Bub, if that's all right. I'll stay up until you're ready to turn in. We haven't had a chance to talk. Know what I mean? I feel like me and her monopolized the evening. He lifted his beard, let it fall, picked up his cigarettes and his lighter. That's all right, I said. I'm glad for the company. I guess I was. Every night I smoked dope and I stayed up as long as I could before I fell asleep. My wife and I hardly ever went to bed at the same time. When I did go to sleep, I had these dreams. Sometimes I'd wake up from one of them, my heart going like crazy. Something about the church in the Middle Ages was on the TV. Not your run-of-the-mill TV fare. I wanted to watch something else. I turned to the other channels, but there was nothing on them either. So I turned back to the first channel and apologized. Well, it's all right, the blind man said. It's fine with me. Whatever you want to watch is okay. I'm always learning something. Learning never ends. Won't hurt me to learn something tonight. I got ears, he said. We didn't say anything for a time. He was leaning forward and his head was turned at me, his right ear aimed in the direction of the set. Very disconcerting. Now and then his eyelids drooped and then they snapped open again. Now and then he put his fingers to his beard and tugged like he was thinking about something he was hearing on the television. On the screen, a group of men wearing cowls was being set upon, tormented by men dressed in skeleton costumes and men dressed as devils. The men dressed as devils wore devil masks, horns, and long tails. This pageant was part of a procession. The Englishman who was narrating the thing said it took place in Spain once a year. I tried to explain to the blind man what was happening. Skeletons, he said. I know about skeletons. And he nodded. The TV showed this one cathedral. Then there was a long, slow look at another one. Finally, the picture switched to the famous one in Paris with the flying buttresses and its spires reaching up to the clouds. The camera pulled away to show the whole of the cathedral rising above the skyline. There were times when the Englishman who was telling the thing would shut up and just simply let the camera move around the cathedrals, or else the camera would tour the countryside, men in fields walking behind oxen. I waited as long as I could. Then I felt I had to say something. I said, "They're showing the outside of this cathedral now. Gargoyles, little statues carved to look like monsters. Now I guess they're in Italy." Yeah, they're in Italy. There's paintings on the walls of this one church. "Those fresco paintings, Bub?" he asked as he sipped from his drink. I reached for my glass, but it was empty. I tried to remember what I could remember. "You're asking me, are those frescoes?" I said. "That's a good question. I don't know." The camera moved to a cathedral outside Lisbon. Differences in the Portuguese cathedral compared with the French and Italian were not that great. But they were there, mostly the interior stuff. Then something occurred to me, and I said, "Something has occurred to me. Do you have any idea what a cathedral is? I mean, what they look like, that is? Do you follow me? If somebody says cathedral to you, do you have any notion what they're talking about? Do you know the difference between that and a Baptist church, say?" He let the smoke dribble from his mouth. "I know they took hundreds of workers, 50 or 100 years to build," he said. "I just heard the man say that, of course. I know generations of the same families worked on the cathedral. I heard him say that, too. The men who began their life's work on it, they never lived to see the completion of their work. In that wise, Bub, they're no different from the rest of us, right?" He laughed, and then his eyelids drooped again. His head nodded, and he seemed to be snoozing. Maybe he was imagining himself in Portugal. The TV was showing another cathedral now. This one was in Germany. The Englishman's voice droned on. "Cathedrals," the blind man said. He sat up and rolled his head back and forth. "If you want to know the truth, Bub, that's about all I know. What I just said, what I heard him say. But maybe you could describe one to me. I wish you'd do that. I'd like that. If you want to know, I really don't have a very good idea." I stared hard at a shot of the cathedral on the TV. How could I even begin to describe it? But say my life depended on it. Say my life was being threatened by an insane guy who said I had to do it or else. I stared some more at the cathedral before the picture flipped off into the countryside. There was no use. I turned to the blind man. I said, "To begin with, they're very tall." I was looking around the room for clues. They reach up, way up, and up, toward the sky. They're so big, some of them, that you have to have these supports to help hold them up, so to speak. These supports are called buttresses. Remind you of viaducts for some reason. But maybe you don't know viaducts either. Sometimes the cathedrals have devils and such carved into the front. Sometimes lords and ladies. "Don't ask me why this is," I said. He was nodding. The whole upper part of his body seemed to be moving back and forth. "Not so good, am I?" I said. He stopped nodding and leaned forward on the edge of the sofa. As he listened to me, he was running his fingers through his beard. I wasn't getting through to him, I could see that. But he waited for me to go on just the same. He nodded like he was trying to encourage me. I tried to think what else to say. They're really big, I said. They're massive. They're built of stone, marble, too, sometimes. In those olden days, when they built cathedrals, men wanted to be close to God. In those olden days, God was an important part of everyone's life. You could tell this from their cathedral building. I'm sorry, he said. It looks like it's just the best I can do for you. I'm just no good at it. That's all right, Bub, the blind man said. Hey, listen. I hope you don't mind my asking. Can I ask you something? Let me ask you a simple question. Yes or no? I'm just curious, and there's no offense. You're my host, but let me ask you. You are in any way religious? You don't mind me asking? I shook my head. He couldn't see that, though. I mean, a wink is the same as a nod to a blind man.
Well, we have 7 minutes left. I hope you're as entertained as I am as listening to this, and the tone of the person who's writing it, and the self-discovery, and the rightness and wrongness of his opinion. It's going to go a little past. We usually end exactly at an hour. It's going to go a little past, but I'm going to go ahead and play the whole thing, and then I will still post the link for you as well. So have a fantastic day, guys.
I guess I don't believe in anything. Sometimes it's hard, you know what I'm saying? Sure I do, he said. Right, he said. The Englishman was still holding forth. My wife sighed in her sleep. She drew a long breath and went on to sleeping. You have to forgive me, I said, but I can't tell you what a cathedral looks like. It just isn't in me to do it. I can't do any more than I've done. The blind man sat very still, sat down as he listened to me. I said, the truth is, cathedrals don't mean anything special to me. Nothing. Cathedrals. There's something to look at on late night TV, that's all they are. Then, the blind man cleared his throat. He brought something up. He took a handkerchief from his back pocket. Then he said, I get it, Bub. It's okay. It happens. Don't worry about it. He said, hey, listen to me. Will you do me a favor? I got an idea. Why don't you find us some heavy paper and a pen? We'll do something. We'll draw one together. Get us a pen and some heavy paper. Go on, Bub. Get the stuff, he said. So I went upstairs. My legs felt like they didn't have any strength in them. They felt like they did after I'd done some running. In my wife's room, I looked around. I found some ballpoints in a little basket on her table, and then I tried to think where to look for the kind of paper he was talking about. Downstairs in the kitchen, I found a shopping bag with onion skins in the bottom of the bag. I emptied the bag and shook it. I brought it into the living room and sat down with it near his legs. I moved some things, smoothed the wrinkles from the bag, spread it out on the coffee table. The blind man got down from the sofa, sat next to me on the carpet. He ran his fingers over the paper, went up and down the sides of the paper, the edges, even the edges. He fingered the corners. All right, he said. All right. Let's do her. He found my hand. The hand with the pen. He closed his hand over my hand. Go ahead, Bub. Draw, he said. Draw. You'll see. I'll follow along with you. It'll be okay. Just begin now like I'm telling you. You'll see. Draw, said the blind man. So I began. First I drew a box that looked like a house. Could have been the house I lived in. Then I put a roof on it. At either end of the roof, I drew spires. Crazy. Swell, he said. Terrific. You're doing fine, he said. Never thought anything like this could happen in your lifetime, did you, Bub? Well, it's a strange life. We all know that. Go on now. Go on. Keep it up. I put in windows with arches. I drew flying buttresses. I hung great doors. I couldn't stop. The TV station went off the air. I put down the pen. I closed with my fingers. The blind man felt around over the paper. He moved the tips of his fingers over the paper, all over what I had drawn. Nodded. Doing fine, the blind man said. I took up the pen again. He found my hand. I kept at it. I'm no artist, but I kept drawing just the same. My wife opened up her eyes and gazed at us. She sat up on the sofa, her robe hanging open. She said, "What are you doing? Tell me, I want to know." I didn't answer. The blind man said, "We're drawing a cathedral. Me and him are working on it. Press hard." He said, "That's right, that's good." He said, "Sure, you got it, bub, I can tell. You didn't think you could, but you can, can't you? Oh, you're cooking with gas now. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna really have us something here in a minute. How's your arm?" He said. "Heck, put some people in there now. What's a cathedral without people?" My wife said, "What's going on? Robert, what are you doing? What's going on?" "It's all right," he said. "Close your eyes now," the blind man said to me. I did it. I closed them just like he said. "Are they closed?" he said. "Don't fudge." "They're closed," I said. "Keep them that way." He said, "Don't stop now. Draw." So we kept on with it. His fingers rode my fingers as my hand went over the paper. It was like nothing else in my life up to now. Then he said, "I think that's it. I think you got it. Take a look. What do you think?" But I had my eyes closed. I thought I'd keep them that way for a little longer. I thought it was something I ought to do. "Well," he said, "are you looking?" My eyes were still closed. I was in my house, like that. But I didn't feel like I was inside anything. "It's really something," I said.
Okay. And that will end our week 1. I hope you had a fantastic week, guys. And I will see you next week.